Welcome to this episode of Totally TM called Dog Noodles. I'm here with my friend Melissa of 25 years. She took graduate statistics from me at the University of Maryland College Park and then asked me to become her wedding photographer. And subsequently I became their family photographer as the family grew. Her husband and now two lovely daughters. Today's episode of Totally TM, Dog Noodles, is not about dog food. A music student learning a new tune on the fiddle, banjo, or guitar will noodle around until they get the tune right, or the teacher says, stop noodling. So Melissa and I are here today to noodle on about dogs that we have known. Melissa, tell me about your first dog.
Okay, so that takes me back like 40 plus years. So my first dog's name was Smudge, and that usually gets a reaction. You know, I've not heard that name since then. So we named the dog Smudge because that's what it looked like. It looked exactly like a big gray puff, a smudge. And Smudge, or we called her Smudgy, was as sweet as her name. That's what I remember most. She was sweet. Whenever we were animal critter lovers in our family, so whenever we ventured out and found things that were injured or sick and brought them home, whatever it was, Smudgy would just keep her distance and just be near, like she was protecting them. And so she just had that sweetness about her. And oh my gosh, yes. What I remember, what just popped into my mind was Smudgy, the way Smudgy looked when we traveled. So we'd throw her in, our old station wagon that we had back in the day and roll the window down, and always kind of worried that she would fall out of the window because she'd get her whole body like out the window and her ears would be flying in the wind and she'd be smiling. It was just quite an image, and we'd all be laughing, and the good news is she never actually fell out the window, but she did bring a lot of joy to the people that saw her and us. So how about you, Doug?
Yeah, my first dog came into the household from my mother's sister when I was 8, my brother was 5. A beagle we called Jingle Bells because we got the dog at Christmas time. And my brother and I were always wrestling, and my mother was worried about who would, want the dog the most. And so we divided our responsibilities. And my brother was in charge of the front half of Jingle Bells, and I was in charge of the back half of Jingle Bells. I would walk Jingle Bells and my brother would feed Jingle Bells. So then, the other story about Jingle Bells, my first dog, is that my mom liked to give it hot toast because Jingle Bells would jump around and that sort of thing. And before she gave Jingle Bells the hot toast, Mom would teach her to bark. And this was great, except that as Jingle Bells grew older, every time somebody put a slice of bread in the toaster, the beagle would bark.
Oh.
So, Melissa, do you have dogs now?
I actually do, and it's funny that you mentioned the beagle barking because we have a barking beagle as we speak. And
named Bailey.
Named Bailey. Bailey the barking beagle. Much to my husband's surprise, I brought Bailey home after about a month of volunteering at the SPCA, and Bailey seemed pretty quiet when I walked by his cage, and looked just so sweet and gentle, and I brought him home and he just hasn't stopped barking since, and actually he just barks mostly at my husband, so we're working on that, but just such a sweet dog though. Has bonded with our cat and our other dog, Zenny. So Zenny, I got about 9 years ago in Germantown, also a rescue. And we called Zenny because we got her on 10-10-10 in Germantown, and 10 is Zen in German. I thought, well, Zenny looks like this sweet, mellow puppy, and Zen's the perfect name. And then I brought her home, and we discovered that she's an Australian cattle dog. And there isn't a bone in her body, I think, that has rested in 9 years since we've gotten her. So, Zenny and Bailey. How about you? Tell me about your latest dog experience.
Well, we just lost our latest dog a short while ago to natural causes. Daisy, a blue tick coonhound rescue, and I like to think, my wife and I like to think that Daisy came to visit us for 3 years. I keep this picture next to my reading chair, and
Look at that diamond.
she had Diamond, and the kids in the neighborhood thought she was royalty. She was so mellow and friendly. Kids would come by and pet her and ask about that little Diamond. Daisy would spend a lot of time on the couch. This is a picture of her on the couch. When we had visitors, she would just come up and sniff, and then she would just disappear. Daisy was a scenthound. Now, my wife's brother has Rhodesian Ridgebacks, which are sight hounds, and they're very big. Daisy was 90 pounds, and the Ridgebacks that Dennis had were 100 pounds. And so when they came to visit, they brought one of the Rhodesians with them, Kango. I said, let's make sure these dogs get along, because Daisy was tough and wouldn't back down, and I wanted to make sure they got along. So we went out, and the two dogs greeted. Dennis had a big collar, and I had Daisy on on her harness, and the dogs' noses went like this, and they touched, and everything was fine. They got along. There was no snarling, no growling, no nothing. And we took a walk together, the four of us, the Rhodesian, the blue tick coonhound, Dennis, and me. And Daisy had her nose in the grass, like that. And Kango had his nose in the air like this. The scent hound was up there. And it was as if they lived in parallel universes. It made me believe the physicists who believe in parallel universes. It was quite remarkable. We've not always had hounds. I've always been a lab lover. And 7 years ago, gone now, is our yellow lab, Katie. And so I always thought I'd be a lab lover forever. But the difference was that when Katie came in the room, she would sniff you and, lick you and wag her tail and wag her whole body and the whole bit, in contrast to Daisy, who would kind of go and then go back onto the couch. Very, very different. And I have a reading chair over here, and in the mornings when I'd be reading a newspaper, the differences would be that Daisy would come in, look at me, turn her butt towards me, and plop down, looking away from me, as if maybe she was guarding me from something. Protecting me, yeah.
That's amazing.
But when we had Katie, the yellow lab, this is Katie, the yellow lab, she would come in while I was reading the newspaper. She would plop down in front of me, facing me, with her eyes lit up like this, as if to say, okay, put that newspaper down, it's time to play tennis.
Different breeds.
Different breeds.
Different roles, different jobs.
And so the latest dog, the lesson of Daisy, the coonhound, and I really have grown to love hounds, was to go about quietly regarding the world. And that's how Daisy was, quietly regarding the world, not making a fuss over everything, just enjoying every scent, every smell on the walks. And that's the lesson that Daisy taught me. Well, thank you for watching Melissa and Doug noodle on about dogs in this episode of Totally TM. Oh, are you still with us? Oh my goodness. Thank you for hanging on there. We got one more thing. It's a little present for my friend Melissa.
Oh my gosh,
and
you're kidding.
she doesn't know this, but open it. Yeah, open it. Oh, of course. Yes, of course. Open it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, let's rip it open. No,
Rip it open, okay.
Yeah.
Oh no! Are you kidding?
Yeah, open it. I wanna see it. I wanna see it.
Okay. Oh my gosh! I love these things. I love. You did not.
I did so.
You did not.
Yes.
Look at this.
Show the audience what you got.
It's dogs.
It's for
Inside dogs.
It's
More
for the
dogs.
inner life of dogs.
It's the inner life of
Melissa.
dogs. Oh my gosh! Wait, this one wants. There's still another
There's
dog
still
in there.
one.
Oh, look
There's
at
another
this.
dog.
I love this. Oh my! This is the best present ever. I used
Oh
to
my
play
goodness.
with dolls
Oh
like
my
this
goodness.
when I was little. There's a bus.
So happy 2019!
Yay! Oh my
So
gosh.
sweet. That's the. We're concluding now Dog Noodles with the inner life of dogs as represented. These aren't Russian dogs. These are just normal dogs
Yeah, they don't
within
look
dogs
Russian
within
at all.
dogs. They don't look Russian at all. Thank you, Melissa, for joining me for an episode of Totally TM. Now this does conclude our episode, and we're going to go and enjoy the wooden dogs.
This is